Welcome every pony! Dansburst Studios official here. This is going to be the first of two videos responding to Tibbles Yorkie, the canine. This video was a long time in the making. I started it like a month ago, at first as a response to her role in the El Money drama. But after I looked more into Tibbles, I saw a number of social media posts where she platforms herself as one of the activists in the latest wave of the dogmatic crusade against zoophilia. I've had issues with these activists for a while now, but I realized I'd never gathered all my thoughts on them in one place. That's going to be the goal of this video. I'm going to be arguing against two separate but related claims. First, that zoophilia is morally wrong, and next, that zoophilia should be illegal. Well, let's start with the first. A lot of anti-zoophiles think that raping an animal is morally wrong and makes you a bad person. And people have, of course, asked them, why is that any different than eating an animal? I'm not against people eating animals. The anti-zoophiles will reply that we have to eat animals for nutrition, and even if we didn't, vegan stuff would be more expensive. But what if this weren't true? Here's my main claim. Even if all humans had readily available 100% nutritious bland tofu, it wouldn't be wrong or immoral for a human to hunt and kill an ostrich, either because they like the taste of its meat or because they enjoy the thrill of the hunt. It turns out that this is all we need to deduce that zoophilia is not immoral. First of all, what would it mean for zoophilia to be moral? Well, in raping the animal, zoophiles put frivolous human sexual pleasure above the animal's sexual autonomy and well-being. So, to establish morality, we just need to see if we can deduce statement Z. Now, frivolous human taste and sexual pleasures are both extra, unnecessary pleasures, so they should be roughly as important in whatever moral consideration you happen upon. Some may say that the sexual pleasure would come from the rape of the animal, while the taste pleasure would happen only as a byproduct of killing the animal. This would, somehow, make satisfying the sexual pleasure more cruel, because it is more direct. These people would say that because satisfying the sexual desire in this case is more cruel, it should be given less weight. I don't think emotional cruelty should factor into morality assessments at all, only the consequences of the actions. I'll explain this more when proving my main claim. Even if it did, I don't think doing something directly is any more cruel than doing it indirectly, since they have the same consequences. Besides, getting pleasure from the thrill of the hunt is taking direct pleasure in the death of the animal, and I don't think that's immoral either. This gives us Lemma 1. From our main claim, we know it's fine to eat an ostrich to taste its meat or for the thrill of the hunt. This means it's not immoral to prioritize frivolous human taste or hunt pleasure over an animal's life, which gives us Lemma 2. Killing an animal for its taste is a bigger harm to the animal than raping it for pleasure would be. Some say that non-mutilative rape would somehow traumatize an animal so much that it would be worse than killing them. We know this isn't true, because animals who are raped don't become suicidal. Sure, some dogs who are traumatized by owners might stop accepting food from other people, but this is because of fear and lack of trust in people. If you leave food in an empty room with them, they're gonna eat it, instead of starving themselves. All non-human species value reproduction first, then life, and then avoiding pain, in that order and without exception. Barring self-sacrifice to save their young, there hasn't been a single documented case of pet animals or wild animals committing suicide, especially not due to something like depression. This gives us Lemma 3. From here, it's just a simple use of the transitive property. Linking lemmas 1, 2, and 3 gives us claim Z. But suppose you're not convinced that frivolous human pleasure of any kind should be placed above an animal's life. Which is to say, you don't agree with my main claim that we used to prove lemmas 1 and 2 in our zoophilia deduction. Tibbles was a vegan herself, before quitting it for both health and practicality reasons, so she would likely reject that too. Now, how could I prove that zoophilia is moral in a way that would convince a vegan? Say that, like the vegans, you don't believe you should inflict harm on animals for any frivolous human pleasure. One reason people may say that they wouldn't accept frivolous hunting is because killing an animal frivolously like that violates the animal's right to life, whatever that means. Apparently, they think it's morally wrong to harm animals, even when that harm doesn't affect humans. I think that, in terms of measurable consequences, it doesn't make sense to call this a bad action. You might ask, in our deductions of the morality or immorality of actions, which is really just assessing the goodness of the consequences, why is it that we should ignore any consequences, no matter how grave, caused to animals that don't affect humans? This is a thing that makes sense to do both spiritually and logically. Speaking in spiritual terms, God made a natural hierarchy of all living things: bacteria, plants, invertebrates, vertebrates, non-human mammals, humans, angels, and God. To place an animal's will before a human's will in any moral consideration is to debase God's vision of humans as the natural rulers of Earth. The angel Lucifer tried to subvert this hierarchy by leading angels in a revolt against God, the natural ruler of the heavens. Lucifer wanted to impose his own will above God's. He was sent to hell, becoming Satan. Literally, the origin of all sin in this universe comes from subversions of natural hierarchy. But even if you're a materialist, you can't deny that there's a clear hierarchy in terms of cognitive capacity. Bacteria, plants, non-human animals, and then humans. I hate to say this, but sorry, furries, we don't live in Zootopia. Lesser animals are not a part of human society. They live their whole lives in the natural world, or in our simulations of it, like zoos. You can't put predator and prey on the same moral footing. Just by virtue of intelligence, humans can do things that animals can't, and experience richer lives than animals ever could. Besides, what kind of self-loathing society would we be if we put the needs of other species of lesser sentience on equal leveling to our own, or even ahead of our own pleasures? Human rights don't exist in the natural world, just in human society. If you want proof, tell an ocean about your right to live as it's drowning you. We make for ourselves human rights because it helps our society run more smoothly and more stably. This makes the human experience all around better. But if you take the basic rights that we afford to humans for smoother societal functioning, like the right to life and the right to sexual consent, and you mindlessly copy-paste those on the animals, you lose the reasons why we made up those rights in the first place. To make a better experience for humans and human society. This is why I believe that any reasonable definition of morally wrong can only take into account negative consequences caused to other humans. So that settles the morality of zoophilia. It's moral. But now for the next point. Should zoophilia be illegal? Some people think that violently hunting or having sex with an animal would reinforce violent or sexual psychological habits that would carry over into more violent or sexual actions and thoughts about real humans. These people think that outlawing or creating social taboos against these actions would reduce harm, because it would reduce the supposed carryover effects from the proxies to other actual humans. We reinforce violent and sexual psychological habits indirectly, all of the time, when we watch digital content like violent video games and internet pornography. Violence has never been more easily accessible at any point in human history than today on the internet. But despite this, if you trust modern studies, then you should note that they say that violent video games, movies, and similar don't make people more likely to commit violent crimes. It's similar for internet pornography. It doesn't make people more likely to be rapists. Acting violently through digital proxies doesn't bleed over into the human world. Neither does acting violently through animal proxies. Another more immediate issue with outlawing or tabooing violence against proxies is that it actually creates more harm by criminalizing and shaming people who would have never committed violence or sexual assault against other humans in the first place. The proxy carryover argument is one of the main justifications that people and lawmakers have used for government censorship and bans on violent video games and lolicon. Take a look at this Kotaku article. An American faces prison just for bringing manga to Canada on his laptop. You guys can all read, right? Cool. I'm just gonna leave this up here for you. Anyway, it's not just Canada. They're doing this in Japan too. With Tibble's Heart's tweets saying that zoophiles should be shot on sight, I mean, she clearly believes that it's the necessary implication. Which is to say, according to her, if you practice zoophilia, then you must be, without fail or exception, a bad person. That's why she wants to shoot them on sight, without even bothering to check if the human person on the other side of the screen is cruel towards other humans, or kind to them. Conditioning on being a zoophile, is it probabilistically more likely for you to be a bad person, in the consequence-based sense I mentioned before? Probably slightly, though I would say not nearly as much as people think. It's like violent video games. They don't cause you to be more violent to others, but violent people are more likely to be attracted to them. Just like Tibbles, these lawmakers are literally collapsing the difference between liking the idea of something in fiction and liking it or wanting to do it in real life. That's why they've arrested this guy, because they think he'll be more probabilistically likely to commit a crime with real children in the future. This is despite this person not having any criminal record, which, arresting people for crimes that haven't happened yet, shooting zoophiles on sight who haven't harmed other humans at all. What is this, Minority Report? It's like social media's most fanatic anti-shippers are placed in charge of the laws of all these countries. In short, when you make judgments off of people based off of probabilistic assumptions that stem from the groups they're a part of, instead of from their actions as individuals, you'll inevitably write off good people unfairly. I don't think there's anything wrong with consuming content that glorifies or simulates murder or rape. These things don't cause harm in the real world, and I don't think that they should be outlawed. Moreover, I think any digital or an animal coping mechanism that lets people satisfy their baser drives on non-human proxies actually reduces harm to humans. I mean, let's be frank here. Which side would you rather have a hypersexual individual with low self-control focusing on? Left or right? So then, why is media that glorifies illegal sexual acts outlawed and societally taboo, while media that glorifies murder is perfectly legal? Why is it societally taboo to frivolously rape an animal, but not to frivolously kill it? Simple. Because just like anti-zoo activists, these online social activists and lawmakers are acting based on their intuitive emotional feelings of disgust. You'd expect leftists like Tibbles to already know that this is not a good thing to base policy or activism on. After all, it was done to them by lawmakers in the war on drugs who, in addition to their political agenda, felt morally disgusted by druggies and hippies. People got years in prison for a gram of weed. It was also done to leftists by lawmakers who would criminalize homosexuality, for one reason they used, in addition to their ideology, usually conservative Christian, was the intuitive feeling of disgust that they and others had. This very day, lawmakers in Uganda and other backwards third world countries explicitly rely on intuitive disgust to shape their laws and cultural values.
This is what they do. Number one, you can see a man here having sucked the other person's rectum, and the other person is poo-pooing, and this one is eating the poo-poo all over the place. Tell me, when you have a law against homosexuality, do you say except eating poo-poo? I mean, look at this guy sincerely. Bishop. Stagafulaizaha. Huh? Hajat. We do not want this sickness. This is sick, and it's therefore deviant. We do not want it.
It's funny how leftists forget this principle when they're the powerful group, relative to an even smaller minority, zoophiles. Of course, leftists have some standard ideological reasons to rationalize their intuitive disgust. Leftists might say that the groups that they support are protected classes, discriminated against based on the basis of unchangeable parts of their identity, and that zoophilia is a paraphilia, which is not based on identity. What about HRT femboys, who self-admittedly either have a paraphilia or to make a personal choice to inject themselves with that stuff? This isn't based on an innate sense of identity. They just want to do a taboo behavior that doesn't cause broader societal harm. Though I'm not one of them, A big chunk of people would feel intuitive disgust at using cross-sex hormones for non-essential sexual or social benefits. Leftists support that group and call them valid. So why don't they support zoophiles who also want to do a taboo behavior that doesn't cause broader harm to humans? Some of them may say that it's about consent, that the first group consents to do that to themselves, but the zoophiles bring in another party which doesn't consent to sex. Leftists use this argument, say there's a right violation in the second group's action, but not in the first. This argument falls flat immediately, since an animal can't consent to being eaten any more than it could consent to being raped. As I already mentioned, though, there's no reason to give animals human rights, so that objection wouldn't make sense. More generally, leftists like to think of rightists as the group that's uniquely motivated by intuitive disgust. When they do this, they ignore their own blind spots, where their intuitive disgust affects their political beliefs. A lot of headlines and articles in news media promote this way of thinking, which is based on some poorly designed studies. But leftists themselves are just as prone to thinking in terms of disgust, just in different ways and at different things. I'll let you guys read from this article by Psyche Ideas. The root cause of intuitive disgust in both leftists and rightists is the idea that there is going to be some indirect harm caused by the disgusting behavior. The leftists who are disgusted by having racist thoughts in their head, and the rightists who are disgusted just by masturbation or promiscuity. Both of these have an intuitive feeling that those behaviors will cause some harm indirectly, either to oneself or to others. For zoophilia, this intuitive disgust is probably an evolutionary instinct. Back then, we didn't have the sanitization practices to stop STDs from same-species sex, let alone cross-species sex. We've also ruled out the possibility of indirect harm to other humans when we debunked the proxy carryover argument. So if we make legal or moral judgments about zoophiles based off of an intuitive disgust that's rooted in a risk of a harm that's no longer present, or that doesn't apply, we're letting our animal instincts shape our beliefs and our decisions for us. A zoophile is honest about his carnal desire to rape an animal, but the dogmatic anti-zoophile activists mask their carnal disgust with flimsy ideological justifications, without care for the Folcon and cub porn consumers who get shamed and criminalized needlessly. That smug, self-assured dishonesty is more bestial than zoophilia is. Maybe you say that the fact that some people are turning to zoophilia is a sign of some other problem, and you'd be right. Take drugs for example. When it comes to drug activism, leftists don't say druggies aren't valid, or that druggies should be shot on sight. The fact that some people use drugs as an outlet to the point that it harms themselves is a sign of either an individual personal issue or a broader social issue. The leftists believe this social issue is something like low wages, a housing crisis, punitive justice, or the collapse of the third space. Basically, any of the main themes in the overstretched, bloated writing that passes for social analysis on BreadTube video essays. With drug activism, leftists realize that it isn't useful at all to direct their political activism against people using the outlet, or their social activism towards making the outlet taboo. Instead, they focus on the root cause. Similarly, the root cause for people turning to zoophilia as an outlet is either inborn feelings of sadism, in the case of the subminority of zoosadists, or, much more commonly, unlimited internet pornography giving people new fetishes. Tibbles wants to have it both ways. On one paw, she wants free use and spread of internet pornography, while on the other paw, she wants to magically make it so that no pony ever develops any sexual fetishes which are conventionally immoral. This second bit of activism is supposed to happen through creating social taboos, like the never-ending moralistic crusade which is against, among other things, L. Money's art, Lolly and Zoo, and pro-ship, which is problematic shipping, fiction, and art. The only effective virtue signaling against the free fringe products of a bigger trend is just to raise your own ego and sense of self-righteousness. I think the fact that some minority will develop problematic sexual fetishes is inevitable in the deregulated internet, though I think the sacrifice is minor enough to be very much worth it. Instead of just writing off every single member of this minority group as problematic or a bad person, I think we have to judge them as individuals. How do they act in real life with other humans outside of digital fiction? That'll tell you much more about a person's character. Back to Tibbles. What other reasons might furries like herself have for social signaling against zoophiles? Aside from ideological reasons, there are also some pragmatic reasons. There are some furry haters, which I don't support by the way, much love to the furry and FNAF community, who would say that all furries are zoophiles. So one effective social signaling that you're against zoophiles might be to try to get furry haters to not hate on you. I don't think this is a useful thing to do. Being a brony myself, I've met brony haters who believe things like bronies are either pedophiles, effeminate men, man-children, zoophiles, or it's some combination of those. I don't fall into any of these categories, though I don't think the people who do are bad people. My editor 70 Isle is a man-child, and he's been a very good friend, that is, when he's not eating hayburgers instead of editing. Besides, why should I care if some hater thinks I'm something I'm not? There was a military brony, by the name of Jake the Army Guy, who was very against man-children and his own morality. He worked hard to get fit and to succeed in life, so he took it very personally when brony haters called him a man-child. But his response wasn't to put something on his bio like, not a man-child, they're losers and invalid. No. Why should he social signal that he's against man-children? All that does is throw man-children under the bus, without actually changing the stereotypes of the brony haters. They're still going to think of him as a loser anyway, so why does it matter what they think? Those people just love to hate. So, instead of hating on zoophiles and creating even more negativity, why not try to make friends, or to get to know at least one zoophile? It might be hard, since they might believe different things than you do, especially about subjects you find touchy, but a lot of zoos make really cool art, writing, and games. In fact, some of my favorite non-erotic fanfictions in FAM fiction are written by zoophiles. When you write these people off, you limit yourself to a part of the human experience, keeping yourself blind to learning about the inner lives of other humans just because of ideological disagreements. If you're a very political person like Tibbles, this will be hard advice to take. But trust me, the friends you make along the process of withholding snap moral judgments against others will make it very much worth it. After all, friendship is magic. That's all for this video. I put a lot of time and effort into researching and script writing this. My deepest thanks to my loyal editor, 70 Isle. This video wouldn't have been possible without him. If you liked this video, and you're fine with my admittedly sparse uploads, then make sure to like and subscribe. This is Dansburst Studios Official, signing off.